Hello, and thanks for tuning in to Hand to Hand in the Trenches, a missionary story podcast. I'm Caleb Hickam.
And I'm Kimberly Croker.
And we are your hosts for this episode of Hand to Hand.
Hand to Hand is a ministry outreach of Charity Baptist Tabernacle in Amarillo, Texas.
And Hand to Hand is a missionary story podcast that tells the true stories of Christians around the world who have hazarded their lives for the Word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. And the train is gone. All right. Welcome to the Z and Morrell bonus episode. And we appreciate you listening today. And also appreciate your patience waiting for this. We kind of debated this a little bit, Kim.
Yeah, it was like, do we do it today? Do we do it tomorrow?
So what happened was, for those who don't know, is some folks were having trouble with if you're using like a podcasting app or podcatcher app, something like that. It was because the most recent episode would be the bonus episode, and if they just hit play while they were at work or something like that, they were having a problem with the bonus episode coming on before the final episode. And which sometimes ruins a good ending, depending on the story.
What just happened?
So I think we'll be doing it this way. We'll release it sometime midweek going forward, and hopefully
I think it'll work better, not be quite so confusing,
right?
And also help people listen to the final episode.
Because that can ruin it.
Who wants to listen to the final episode once you're like, oh, the bonus, that's what happened.
Yeah,
okay,
I already know.
Done.
It's like the ultimate spoiler. As a matter of fact, if you're listening right now and you haven't listened to number 4 yet,
just
stop.
And go back.
Yeah, I'm talking to you. Stop.
We'll wait.
All right. Anyway, all joking aside,
on a more serious note.
Yeah, so I had a really good time with Z and Morrell.
I had a great time with that. We had fun recording that one.
And it was a really, really good story. And I think, like you and I talked about, a lot of people don't know this story at all.
Before you started telling me about this story and I started learning about this story for the podcast, I didn't know anything about him.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And it's an incredible story. I don't know how many times you told me, Kim, this is an incredible story. And I was like, yeah, Caleb, I'm sure it is. And then I was like, wow, he's right, it is. But it is really, really interesting. And we barely scratched the surface of Zian's life.
Yes, that's exactly true.
We barely scratched the surface.
There's a lot of stuff we didn't have time to talk about. Specifically, a lot of their heartaches. We just talked about them briefly. But, it's pretty hard, actually, for us in modern times. Even if you read the whole book, it's hard for us to really understand, I think, the difficulties and hardships of a pioneer family in the 1830s in Texas. And but add to that the fact that we know Satan was obviously attacking this family specifically, or his minions at the very least. All right, settle down. His minions at the very least were certainly attacking this family because they didn't want the gospel coming to this land. Yeah. And, of course, we should all remember that, too. Whenever you pray for your missionaries, even now, they do face a serious attack because Satan does do everything he can to stop the gospel from reaching lost souls in foreign lands and here at home, and so that is something important to pray about.
Absolutely.
One incident that happened that we didn't talk about in the podcast at all, Kim, was about Zian's son.
Yep, that's what I was about to say, his son.
Right, so, and we won't take time to tell it in detail here, but we will give the book here in a few minutes. But Z and Morrell's son, we talked about briefly in the podcast how during the entire time that Texas was its own nation, it was constantly either talk about wars and rumors of wars, right? It was constantly the case in Texas.
Yeah.
They were either at war with Mexico or they were expecting war with Mexico constantly. And during one of those wars with Mexico, Zian Morrell's son was captured by the Mexicans and was taken to a prison in Mexico where he served in a Mexican prison for, I believe, like 3 years, I think is what I remember reading. And his health was badly hurt by it. Even Zian's wife was, constantly worried about her son, obviously. And
the
Zian,
physical and emotional strain that would take on a mother, knowing that her child was taken and in prison. I mean, she wouldn't even know if he was still alive many times, just not knowing if he was okay, not knowing if he was alive. That kind of strain, what that would do to her physical body. Like we were talking
and that's
about emotionally,
exactly what
but
it did.
physically, it tore her down.
Yeah, and Zian said that he always felt like it greatly damaged, even destroyed her health. Just the pain that she suffered while her son was in prison. And she would end up, even in spite of the fact that Zian had major health problems throughout his life, he actually ended up outliving his wife. She died and left him a widower several years before him. Yeah. And he says in the book that he attributes that to the pain that she suffered while her son was in prison.
Which I would believe 100% that that's unbelievable what she would have suffered like that.
So that's just to give you like an example and a taste. And I don't know. I like to think that the story, the podcast did a good job of presenting both the joys and the sorrows. But the point is just to give you a little taste of the difficulties, the pain that some people in the past have gone through in order to get out the gospel and to take the gospel to every land. And the Morrell family and Zian and his wife, they went through that. That was the life that they had, but it was something that they were able to do for the Savior.
Yeah.
So,
we talked a lot throughout the podcast about discouragement. We didn't.
That's kind of a major theme, I think.
Yeah, of his story, because Zian went from a land where there was lots and lots of people everywhere, and they were seeing lots and lots of people get saved, and he went somewhere where for a very long time they didn't see anyone get saved, and that had to have been hard on him. We talked about how it was hard, discouraging for him and his family, but we tend to think in today's terms of if you're not seeing results right now, you must not be in God's will. But that's not necessarily true. You know?
Right.
You preach a sermon on it, how the race is not to the swift, but how the race isn't, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
It's a marathon.
You've said that so many times. That's like Caleb's theme saying. He says that.
That's one of my better, I'm going to tell you, that's one of my better sermons.
Yeah.
So if you ever have me come preach for you,
ask for that one. That's a good one.
If the Lord will let me, I'll preach it. But it's true though. That's the thing.
It is true.
It's because it's so true, and it certainly is true today that a lot of Christians struggle with discouragement, because the scourge of Laodicea is that and I'm not trying to make excuses or say that we can't see souls saved today. We do see souls saved.
Yeah, we do, and you should.
And you should, but it's easy to become discouraged because we don't many times see the results that we would like to see.
Yeah.
And in honesty, I think that's probably been the case throughout the ages, depending on your location and depending on your location and things like that.
Yeah.
So in some small way, I do understand, and I think that's what makes his message, his story, so applicable to us today, because it's to remind us that God measures the ministry in faithfulness.
Yeah.
He doesn't measure it in numbers, although we all hope and pray for converts, but God measures the ministry in faithfulness.
Yeah. Well, Zian's whole life, it was mountains and valleys, mountains and valleys, mountains and valleys, and we covered that a lot in the story. Things are going good, and then they'd hit another valley and they'd get discouraged again, and then
chased away from their home by the Indians or something like that,
or son captured by the Mexicans, or whatever it happened to be that they were facing. Even something that we would think as simple as his pony being stolen by the Indians, you know. But we don't realize how seriously
That'd be
that
like
was
your car. It's his car, yeah.
That was his car,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, that's funny.
The Indians came and stole his car, guys. I mean,
That's
it
funny.
wasn't good. But
It was a
things
Mustang.
Like,
His
I
car
know,
was a Mustang.
I know, it was nice too.
Yeah.
But that would be discouraging to us in this day and age. We can
Right.
only imagine what it would be then. In those
That happened to Miss Bailey.
It did happen. Sorry, Bailey, by the way.
We
But
love you,
I mean,
sis.
he didn't have insurance.
Yeah,
to
that's
cover
true.
it,
There's no
You
insurance,
know,
yeah.
there was no insurance to cover it. They lived a hard life. It's true,
Yeah.
and they did it for the cause of Christ.
Yeah. So, discussing it being a hard life and just the difficulties, and but not only that, also the adventures. Like the story is really a cool adventure story too, in a lot of ways. And I hope that comes through in the podcast to some degree as well.
I think episode 3 was my favorite.
Yeah, that was fun. That Indian
love
thing was
that.
fun.
The
Yeah.
Indians was good. That was fun. I'm just saying.
So I had to leave a story out as far as the adventures too, and it was about when he was attacked by a bear, which I won't take time to tell here. But you know that was hard for me because you know I'm fascinated by animal attack stories and man-eating animal stories and things like
That's
that.
another good sermon that he has. If you ever have him, make
This
him
is a
preach on
commercial.
man-eaters.
This is a commercial. This is
Free commercial for evangelist Caleb Hickam.
okay.
But that's a good one.
But anyway,
Man-eaters intrigued Caleb.
yeah,
It's true.
I don't know why. But anyway, so the whole point is that I actually, when we were prepping for this series, for this podcast, I had to be careful, Kim, not to just make it a Western. I had to be careful to make sure we still kept it as a missionary story because there's so many incredible adventures in it, and I had to be careful not to let it just become a Western, you know.
Yeah, because Caleb is an adventurer, you know, and he loves adventures, and he's like, that's what he wants to do. His role model is Teddy Roosevelt, you know. I'm telling
Who
you.
we can't do a podcast on since he wasn't a Baptist, but
Yeah, which is sad to Caleb, by the way.
Right.
But,
well,
you know.
tell me, Kim.
Yes.
All right, we talked about let's do some serious stuff.
Okay.
So we talked about, of course, the heartaches, and we talked about the adventures, and we
Yes.
talked about the race is not to the swift, and the battle's not to the strong.
Mm.
So, and maybe we already did. Maybe that's the answer to you. But what would you say was your number one takeaway from the story of Zian Morrell?
Oh, that, you know, I think that is my main takeaway is the fact that many times he could have easily given up. He could have just quit so many times, gone back to Mississippi, you know.
And a lot of people wanted him to come back.
Yeah, it's not like he would have been, you know, not helping anyone or giving up on God if he had gone back. He would have still been serving the Lord.
But he wouldn't have been doing what God called him to do.
Yeah, because God had a place for him, and he stuck with it, and he went through it, and he did what God called him to do, and we see in the end that God blessed him for it. I mean, a lot of stories of missionaries you'll hear, you know, and you'll hear about people dying at a young age, dying as martyrs and stuff, and we've covered some of those type stories, you know, but his story wasn't like that. He just had to hang in there and stick with it, because the race is not to the swift.
Yeah.
And it was a marathon, you know,
That's true.
and he ran his marathon.
That's true. That's good. And that's the main thing for me, too. And then the other thing, the other side of the coin, so we talked about his adventures, right? The other side of the coin is that God uses people.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you're willing to do something for God, God will let you do something for him,
Yeah.
right? So Zian ended up in a strange place, facing a lot of strange and sometimes difficult and sometimes exciting and sometimes bizarre situations. But the point I'm trying to make is that you will find yourself sometimes in a bizarre situation
Yeah.
if you're trying to do something for the Lord. And I've experienced that, and you have, and you know, every Christian I know has in various ways, ways and places, you find yourself in weird situations when you try to do something for the Lord. And that's just how the Lord is. He lets, and I often say, and I really mean this, it's humbling to me to think that God allows me to do something for Him. Oh. And I think that's a big part of the story too, is that God used Z and Morrell because Z and Morrell was willing. Yeah. And a lot of people would think, if you looked at him with his health problems and things like that, and all his difficulties, that God could find somebody better, or somebody more more well equipped. And but that's not how the Lord works. That's not how the Lord works. The Lord uses you if you're willing to do something for Him. Yeah. And so I think that's a good takeaway from the story as well.
Yeah. And God's protection.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Yeah, that's true.
We talked about that in the podcast too. That's another thing that was really big to me. If you're doing what God called you to do, and when you get in those bizarre situations, you'll also have God's protection.
That's true. That's true. All right. Will you have anything else, Kim?
I think those are the main things that I took away.
Me too. All right. So the name of the book, if you want to read it, is Flowers and Fruits from the Wilderness by Z and Morrell. And you can get it if you want to read it. I'm looking at it right now online from Barnes & Noble. You can buy it's probably, I'm thinking this is a paperback copy for $4.98. So that's a cheap book and a very good read. And I know there's a good hardback copy here that's available on eBay, which is like the one I have, and it's $34.95. That's a good buy for that book. There may be other options for it. I see a few other options here for various prices. So it's a good book, and I think it'll be a blessing to you. Well, I think we're going to call it then. We are sitting right around 15 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and stop. We're looking forward to Obadiah Holmes.
Obadiah Holmes next week.
Yep, which is, by the time you hear this, probably just a few days.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to that. We hope that it'll be a blessing to you, and we appreciate you listening. If you're new to the podcast, right? So if you're new to the podcast and you just started listening to Z and Morrell,
yes,
I'm trying to tell you, you need to go back and listen to our stories from last season.
Yes,
the Vins family, Michael Sattler, and John Birch.
Yeah,
and you should go listen to them because I think
all great stories.
They are. That's true.
Honestly, as much as I like Z and Morrell, I love the story of Z and Morrell, right. But I think my favorite that we've done so far is still the Vins family. And
the thing is, I think almost everyone tells me that.
Really?
Most people, yeah.
Yeah, I love that story.
It's incredible. So while you're waiting for Obadiah Holmes, go do that.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be a blessing to you. And if you've already heard it, then we'll talk to you in a couple of days.
Listen in and listen up, and we'll talk to you later.